Good morning. Good morning. This is Biniam on the Checkin In podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. Today is September the 1st, 2021. This is episode number 44 of the Checkin In podcast. My name is Biniam. I'm your host. Glad to see you, my friends, coming in. I am so delighted we delve into some considerations about ourselves that I'm committed to practicing for me personally so that I can become a better version of me. And I invite you guys to join in at the same time as well in reflecting. Vinny, I've been watching so many podcasts and Spotify's. They're awesome. Thank you so much, Simon. I appreciate that. David, good morning. How are you, my friend? Nice to see you. Thank you for joining in. So, today, episode number 44 on the Checkin In podcast. Listen, there are some things that I continue to celebrate on an ongoing basis for why we do this program, this podcast. 3 reasons are simply reflected in the following words. Number 1, awareness. Number 2, kindness. And number 3, happiness. So these 3 things I am absolutely committed to because I see them as one of my commitments personally to maintaining who I am, enhancing who I am, and continuing to grow into that version of me that I relish, desire, and want to continue to facilitate. Number 1, I want to grow more aware about how I think, how I believe, how I value things in this world. And as I do so, I want to be able to make better decisions, better choices. Good afternoon from England. How are you? Nice to have you here, Ricky. Thank you for joining in. Secondly, kindness. As I grow more aware of myself, I want to reverse the narrative. I want to reverse what happened before where it's harsher. And then hopefully to pursue my happiness as I work through some other stuff in the meantime. But I'm happy to share these lessons as we delve into today's program. Today, we are answering a very interesting question. I'm good, friend. Hope you are well. Also, thank you, my friend, watching from Germany. Patrick, good to have you joining in. Thank you for joining in. Isn't it amazing how these platforms can enable us to connect all over the world? And mind you, this isn't even anything big yet, but it's going to be one day. It's going to be huge. I'm not sure how soon before it starts getting featured. And yet when that happens, the massive amount of encouragement that is going to be extended around the world just by tuning in, that I think is magical. That is worthwhile. That is something I say hell yes to, because that's... I like being a part of that energy. I like being a part of that synergy of intentions. Why don't you do Uber Eats? Basically, I do Uber Eats when I am hanging out with friends, and I Uber Eats because I can do both. And so, yeah, that's why. Thanks for the luck. Thanks for the love you guys are sending me along the live stream chat here. So appreciate that. I'm really grateful for you guys tuning in. Today, the question is as follows. Which 3 things, usually we only have one thing that we're considering, the most important, the most valuable thing. But today, we are considering 3 things. Which 3 things are more important to you than anything else? Which 3 things are more important to you than anything else? So this is where you're considering basically a self-reflective question about yourself right now in the present. Which 3 things at this point in time are the most important to you, and why? Why are those really important to you? So yes, I'm just going to mute a couple of voices here, which aren't as helpful. Guys, when you see those who come in with ulterior motives by way of discouragement, let me remind you, I'm not taking it personally. You don't have to. That's a choice we get. We get this choice to be able to say, what kind of influences are we going to let into our lives, and which kind are we not going to let into our lives, and how do we facilitate those things that we can't control? And that's all part of my answer to the question, which 3 things are more important to you than anything else? So this is where we start thinking about things, I think, usually like, what brings me greatest happiness? What brings me the greatest fulfillment or purpose. So some of those things I think are quite legitimate answers. I have a unique angle in which I'm going to try and answer this question and spend time answering the why part. But here's why I think this question is important, because again, this question gets us into the intentional zone from the coasting zone. The coasting zone, the zone where we cooking or slowly like assessing what kind of influences are coming in. We're just kind of like I've given an analogy of a leaf in the wind, a leaf that is blown around in the wind. That leaf is really helpless by the things that come along in life. And so as that leaf is blown around, it's really at the mercy of wherever the wind is going to take it. I wonder if sometimes we aren't in that same season where we feel like we're being blown around like that leaf. Who's my favorite philosopher? Oh my goodness, that's a great question. Okay, let me give you the short answer and I'll get back onto the topic here. I think because of the realm of free will and the considerations of what free will entails and what my perspectives are on free will, I would say my favorite philosopher perhaps is Augustine. He's one of the church fathers. But his take on free will, I think I align with more. Even though I'm not really one who's professing to be in the faith anymore, I still value that conversation there. So that's my short answer. But back to the point of why this is important for us to be considering questions like this. And today's question again is, which three things are the most important to you than anything else? And I like this one here, especially just because it gets us into that frame of wondering, where are we investing ourselves and why are we investing ourselves there? Which three things are super important that we're like, hey, I'm going to outline these things. When we start thinking like this and wondering which things are really critical and crucial for our development, our growth, what usually tends to happen is we move from that zone in our mind of coasting, which I think we are very prone to do, to, hey, what are those things that I value and want to enhance more of in my life? What are those things I want to give more space and priority for? And so, hello, my dear friend. Good to see you. So that's what I'm wondering is what that question, what the answer to that question is for me, or what that is for you. I would love to hear. So this gets us into that zone where we're like thinking intentionally and saying, what are those things that are important to me, and the why? Why are those three things important? I like that there's three things. I don't think I have a Twitch name. I may have signed up for a Twitch account, but I don't think I have a Twitch name, my friend. Yeah, I don't use Twitch as much because I wasn't sure if that was a good, worthwhile platform for me to be on it. I'm trying to be able to utilize the best ones that enable me to get my content and ideas across to you guys. So three things. I like also that this brings it down to three things. It's a little more forgiving than just choose the one thing that's most important to you. Three things gives you a chance to be able to express and nuance more of what you value. And just wrote a paper on free will and determinism. That's amazing, Samuel. I would love to have access to it or hear what your thoughts were on that. But I got to stay on track with today's topic. But yeah, that's a very engaging conversation that I'm presently often thinking about, even as I reflect on what I observe around me. Yeah, so we should talk. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But as I think of the three things, this is a little more permissive than just one thing. Three things enables us to be able to say, hey, what are those things that are valuable to us or most important to us? And as you list those three things, it gives you a chance to reflect on the nuances of what you find important. You can choose things that are really diverse, saying, hey, I really enjoy the logical side and then the illogical side. And here's why I appreciate those parts both ways. I think maybe, or I really appreciate cooking, and I really appreciate going driving in the mud, as an example. See, those things are so important to you, but they don't seem to have very much to do to each other. And so it gives you a bit more nuance in describing and telling a little bit more about yourself, what's really important. And then finally, I also appreciate this because it enables us to get to that place where we're able to take account of the things that matter to us. The things that matter to us, it's part of that self-awareness piece. As we become more self-aware of ourselves, we can make really helpful decisions. Last night, I was in my Uber driving, and I met a few young men in the course of the evening, and we had some rich conversations. I'm going to encourage you to check out those conversations. I'll be posting them after this podcast today on my audio portion of the Mum series. So that's the Mum series. I think it's called the Mum series. Let me just make sure here, actually. Oh man, what was it now? That one there is called, let me just make sure here. The Mum series on Spotify. You can check it on Gmail, a variety of the other platforms. So check out the Mum series audio on Spotify. And as you check it out, listen for that conversation that I had with these young men. And one of the questions they asked me was, how does one find their sense of purpose? In essence, what I was doing there was I was answering this question. What's the most important thing to you? How do you discover what's the most important to you? The first thing I mentioned to them was becoming self-aware of who you are. When you're able to find out who you are and what makes you tick, what makes you move, what makes you impassioned, then you can start making the right decisions in life that facilitate what really matters to you. And that's really stems from today's question of which three things are most important to you than anything else? What are those things that you say, I want to guard this, I want to hone this in and say, this is really sacred to me. I want to be able to commit myself even more intentionally to whatever these things are. When you know what those things are, when you're self aware of what those really important elements are in your life, then you have a real keen insight in choosing what's really helpful. For example, if you know that you really value community and socializing, you're not going to choose a career that's going to have you off working by yourself and without any interaction with others. Knowing that, being self aware of that is going to enable you, number one, to choose a career or a job that's going to enable you to have access to people in interacting. So you're going to say no to the options that say, hey, you're only going to be by yourself at your desk and there's going to be no interaction with people. That's going to drain you, isn't it? But knowing that you really value that component of interaction and engagement with people will enable you to choose jobs that are maybe in customer service or that are helping people in an active way, one-on-one kind of thing. And as you're able to do that, then you can start choosing the right options in life, the right things to study in school, the right investments to make career wise. And when you are able to get to that point, then you're able to grow in your happiness because you're fulfilling your purpose. And we know that one of the other elements of this podcast, one of the pillars, there's three pillars, is your happiness. We want to maximize our happiness as we become more aware, as we learn to be kind to ourselves, and as we process all the other emotions that frees up space for us to be happy. And so that's a really, really helpful intel. So these are some of the thoughts in consideration to today's question that I find it worthwhile answering and seeing why it's important even for us to consider. Let me dive into my responses for what three things are most important to me than anything else. What three things are most important? Number one, the number one thing that I'm most important, are that I consider the most important to me is, I almost feel like doing a drum roll. Let me do that. I've got a drum roll on my little pad here. Number one, oh, that's applause. That's not it. Let's see this one here. That wasn't it. I'm playing with the various buttons on my little sound mixer pad here that give me some options. And so far, I've been striking out. Let's see. Is it this one here? The drum roll? Oh, that was like a cheap joke drum roll. Okay, never mind. Forget the sound effects. I'll have to figure that out sometime. But number one for me, that's super important, is me. I find myself, I'm the most important priority in my life. Now, this is theoretically, I'm still working at it practically. What I mean by that is I feel that I'm the most important thing that I want to attend to before I attend to anything else. And when I say theoretical right now instead of practical, I'm nailing it out of the park in some ways by making myself a priority. And I'll tell you why I'm number one on my list. But then there's also other elements about me that I'm still working at to realign because I don't treat myself as the number one priority. For example, the last few days, I've felt the crunch to be working a lot more than I should be. And so I've been pushing the work front. I've been sort of skimping out a little bit on what it looks like to care after myself. And so I've been depleted energy wise a little bit. I've had to take a couple of extra naps along the way. So I'm watching those elements and thinking, how can I fine tune the most important thing in my life. And for me, like I said, that is me. If I didn't make myself the most important commitment in my life, what's going to happen is that I'm going to start I'm going to start um falling behind on the other commitments that I'm going to share with you that are also really important. So if I'm not at the very pinnacle of care and concern and priority, if I don't make myself the number one priority, things start falling apart right here at home base. Now, I consider my body home base. This body for me is home base because it's from this body that I'm able to accomplish everything else that I'm about to say is really important to me. If I don't look after this here first, if I don't look after this here first, then what tends to happen is that this falls apart. This falls apart. I can't fulfill on all the other commitments that I have. Does that make sense? I can't fulfill on all the other commitments because those are going to take a piece out of me. And if I don't have energy, if I don't have emotional availability, if I don't have all the things rightly lined right here, those other elements are going to start falling apart because I'm not going to be able to fulfill on the commitments that I need to have there. Does that make sense? With what you just said, what happens when we prioritize others? That's a fantastic question, Samuel. A really great question. Thank you for asking it. Because that's where I used to be. I used to prioritize others as more important than me. When we prioritize others as more important than ourselves, consider what happens on a very economic basis. Let's say, economically, if we're looking at the amount of energy we have, let's say we only have this amount of energy available. Let me see if I can put it in the camera frame. If we only have this amount of energy available in our lives, let's say this much, and we prioritize others first and foremost before ourselves, here's what's going to happen to that energy. This energy is going to deplete over the course of the day, let's say. And as we're giving of ourselves to others, we're giving them the best of ourselves without any reference to ourselves. When we finally finish giving, and when that point of giving to others comes to a completion, what tends to happen is that there is nothing left for yourself, if anything. There's just little to barely anything left. And what happens economically is, let's say this amount of space here was reflective of the emotional energy that we have to give to people. When we give the best of our emotional energy to people, here we are giving, and then now we have almost nothing to nothing left over. And then we realize, oh man, I need energy to give to other people, but how am I going to get energy for myself first? You start depleting, Samuel, on being able to fulfill what your desire is, and that's to give to others. When you've got nothing else left to give to others, you still desire to give to others, but you've got nothing left in the tank. Think of it like a gas tank. When your gas is out and you haven't been putting any gas in to replenish that, you're not going to go anywhere. When your emotional gas is out, you can't give any more of yourself to other people, even though that's what you really want to do. And in the absence of any energy left over, you can't fulfill on the things that are important. And the very fact that you had others before yourself is going to find you empty, and others coming and saying, we wish we could take more, but you don't have anything more to give, so why are we sticking around in the first place? If you don't take care of yourself first, you have nothing left over to give to anyone else. One of the questions I often get, Samuel, is people asking, how are you able to give so much and you still keep on thriving? How are you able to keep on giving at the expense of yourself is what it seems like. And the honest truth is, once upon a time, that was the case. I was depleting myself. I had so much to give and I gave so much lavishly. But at the end of the day, I was exhausted. I was like, holy crap, I need some love, and I don't know how to get that for myself. I never learned how to give that for myself. And so I kept on diminishing my worth in the expense of putting others first before me. But now I'm in this season where I'm like, nope, hell no, that's not where I'm at anymore. What I do now is I make sure that I'm in a good place. Because when you're prioritizing yourself, when you're prioritizing emotionally, energizing yourself, physically, doing things that put back in your physical tank, then you're able to start giving others because you are continuing to make sure that your levels are sufficiently replenished. It's only then that you can give appropriately to others. Is when you have those boundaries that say, here's how much I can give, but no further. You're teaching others to say, how do you value me and make sure that I'm also at the center of my universe. Does that make sense? When you prioritize yourself first, then you're able to fulfill on your commitments to others because you're aware, one, what you can give to others, and then you're also aware of where that line is going to be drawn, where you're saying, this is how much I have to give, and you'll have to come back another day if you want any more from me because I need to look after myself now. That's how I process that. That's a great question, though, Samuel, is if you don't prioritize yourself, if you put others and their needs, their expressions of what they feel is important as your number one, you're going to deplete yourself energy wise, and then you won't be able to fulfill in a long lasting way. You won't be able to be consistent in the long run. And that's a concern because then people will just kind of check out because they're like, yeah, this is not where I'm finding my sustenance or needs being met. So number one, it's really important for me to have me at the very center. Another helpful way that I've thought of expressing this is one of the ways that people think about the word. Yeah, I'm about to say this word. This word that I'm about to say, it has a negative connotation. People have usually been taught, like myself, to consider the word selfish as a bad word. The word selfish as a bad word is it has that sense of where you're like, I'm not supposed to be selfish. I'm supposed to be selfless. And we're taught to be selfless. We grew up giving, giving, giving at the expense of ourselves. I want to redefine this word selfish as, yes, it can have bad connotations. And yet, that's okay, my friend Samuel. I appreciate the quick questions. I'll get to this in a quick second here. The word selfish for me is actually one that I want to redeem and say there are helpful, appropriate ways of being selfish. Selfish where you're looking after yourself first so that you can actually look after others around you. And that's really important. So Samuel follows up saying, how did other people react when you no longer met the expectation of priority? Great question. Here's the thing. It didn't matter for me. When other people expressed dismay, sadness, or saying, but I thought you were this for me, I could say, hey, I appreciate that you love what I'm giving, but I need you to know that I only have so much to give before I have to replenish myself, and I need you to honor that boundary. I'm not asking you to accept it. If you don't want to accept it, that's fine. It's your thing, but I'm going to do what I need to do for myself. So some would give me that response of saying, but I thought you were this, and they're still trying to write into my priority themselves, saying, I want it to be the priority in your life. They want to keep on taking. But that's not what I need. I need people who are very cognizant that I need to look after this first. This body here needs to be looked after well so that I can fulfill. That's, for example, how I'm able to facilitate my commitment with you guys. I've got many followers who would love a chunk of me, but I need to teach them that I'm only available so far and no further. I want to set that expectation at the outset so that you are able to honor and respect it, and you don't have expectations that are more than what I can commit to. So let's say, Samuel, in your own context, if you're wrestling with that and saying, I'm wondering how they're going to respond on their end, that's still in the zone of putting yourself second and other people first because you're more aware of and concerned about their expectations. But what would it look like for us to be able to say, hey, I'm going to move the priority not from other people's expectations, but to my own expectations? And what does that look like for me to attend selfishly to what I need first before I give myself to others? I hope that makes sense, my friend. But that's why I consider myself as number one priority. Number two for me in priority is my family. My family, because they're the ones I've made a commitment and priority to looking after their needs. If I don't look after myself first, then I can't fulfill my commitments to them. If I'm not aware of how much energy I'm giving away, I won't have much left for them. And they're for me a commitment in a very intentional way because they're the ones with whom I share my resources. They're the ones whom I'm sharing my life with. They're the ones whom I'm investing a lot of money in. So with my kids, for example, I really value the opportunity I get to be their dad. I really appreciate the opportunity to work hard and earn the credibility. Credibility is a really important thing. Yeah, that's perfect a way to explain it. I'm glad that makes sense for you, Samuel. Thanks for letting me know. But I need to ensure that for my kids, I am reflecting something that of my values that I want them to consider taking on in their life. Now, they're unique individuals. They're still young. They're 10, 8, and 7. And as they are interacting with me, I want them to grow up through their childhood years with a growing awareness that dad was consistent in the way he valued things. I want them to see what it looks like for me to look after myself first before I look after them. I want them to see why it's really important for them to look after themselves first before they give themselves to others. Is money important to you? It is on a practical level. Yeah, on a practical level, it is. So I'm very aware of my finances and how I'm trying to make ends meet. So that's an important part, but it's not the important part. Because I mean, I could work really hard and neglect my kids and my family. I could provide for them financially really amazingly, but if I wasn't in their life, then I've missed that opportunity. Does that make sense? So that's why money, even though it's a priority, is not anywhere near my top three priorities. For me, my one of my top three priorities, first of all, is myself emotionally, physically, spiritually. How am I tending to me so that I can serve those that are really important to me? My second priority, and I've mentioned this on a few of my videos, is my kids. My kids are more of a priority than you guys, my dear followers, who've given me so much love and following and so on like that. You guys are amazing that way. But my most important commitment over here is my kids, because they're the ones whom I'm feeding. They're the ones who I'm providing shelter for. They're the ones who I'm working on character development. They're the ones I want to see growing in a good way in life. That's the commitment I made to them, and I don't want to let go of that, right? Big fan. Thank you, Avir. I so appreciate you being here. Thank you for letting me know. And then number three, my third priority, or my third most important thing that I value is captured in the word legacy. Hey, I really love all of your videos. Keep up the grind, bro. Thank you so much, Aiden. I appreciate the love as well. Thank you for the encouragements along the way, my dear friends. So yes, I would say number three most important thing is captured for me in the word legacy. Legacy is how I feel I'm going to be remembered in the aftermath of my existence, or even during my existence. What are people going to know about me? My legacy took a huge hit when I finally chose the pathway of transparency in my life. It took a huge hit because when I finally made the decision to be honest and true with those in my world and around me, I lost a lot of credibility because I presented in a certain way whereby people thought they were getting the real me when they're actually getting a version of me that I thought they wanted, even though it didn't reflect who I truly was. So when I finally came out with my disclosure of how I really felt and believed, and it really rocked and hurt so many people around me that had really bought into a version that I'd presented, it was really painful. My legacy took a hit then. Why? Because to those individuals now, I was one who had presented as honest, but I was actually dishonest. And so as they look at me, they have a whole bunch of adjectives that say Binyam is dishonest. Binyam is lacking in transparency. Binyam is not a safe person. Like there's just all these things that is their reference point when they think of me. It was a significant hit that I took because of the decisions that I made. And now I value my legacy, and I knew that it would be dragged through the mud when I made that decision to be honest and transparent with my world. But that's an important thing for me now. I want that to be a part of my legacy now going forward, is that I value honesty and transparency. I want to try again. And this is one of the things I love tremendously in life, is that we get to rewrite our story in a new way if we want to see ourselves growing in a really helpful and appropriate way. So that's why that's important for me, and that's why I invest myself in that trajectory. And so that's why I'm doing this podcast series. That's why I make myself available with the content I'm presenting online. It's basically a reason for me to share my own story of fumbles in life. Once upon a time, my story was one that gripped me with fear and saying, I hope no one ever finds out the real Binyam, because if they ever do, I'm going to be a write-off. People are not going to enjoy or love or care for the contribution in life that I'm giving. But now, I'm super grateful that I'm living in this season of freedom. Freedom to be who I am, the way I want to present in life. And it's one that resonates deeply with me. It was one that resonates in a strong way, where I'm able to say, I've been in that place where I was very fearful. Fearful, like many of you, that if people knew the real you, you would be a write-off. And I want to speak hope into your context, especially as I share my own story, saying, I've lost a lot, but I've also gained so much in this presence pathway. So even as I answered the question, which three things are most important to me than anything else, these are the things that continue to occupy my focus and At the very center of it all is me and my sense of self, my awareness of who I am, my ability to show myself kindness. And finally, how can I pursue my happiness in the midst of processing a lot of difficult things that happen in life? That is a lot of all of us, isn't it? None of us get a freebie. We don't get a free pass on life. What does that look like for us to be able to experience a truer sense of why we exist and why that's important? That's important for me. I want to encourage you to consider checking out my website. Here's what I'm invested in. Here's what I hell yes to. I'm building a community on my website, biniamasters.com, whereby we are focusing on creating this kind of a space that it facilitates and unleashes our ability to experience this freedom, where we can get more aware of ourselves and what makes us tick, where we can become kinder in our reflections of ourselves and each other as we're going through life, and where we can facilitate our happiness. Check it out today. I hope to see you tomorrow on the next episode. Much love to you guys. Happy Wednesday.